Hello, I'm Deb Green. Welcome back to my channel. Today we're going to be painting this pretty little fall scene. I just love these light colored pumpkins, but I don't know what they're called. If you know what they're called, please let me know in the comments. But this painting looks more difficult than it is, and I promise you, you can paint along with me. So if that sounds fun to you, let's get into it. Okay, as we get started, I have my block of Meeden cold press 100% cotton watercolor paper, and I'm going to do this in portrait orientation. I have 2 jars for water. I also have some deep cobalt, which I did mix with a little bit of olive green and some olive green. So as we get started, we're basically going to paint with a little bit of water. Make sure my brush is nice and cleaned out because I don't want any residual green or whatever on there. I'm going to pick up just a little bit of our color, this deep cobalt color, and we're going to come down the center of our pumpkin like a great big oval. A little bit more water on here. Just going to come around the bottom, making that big oval and leave it like that. I want it to soak into my paper a little bit. And I'm going to come next to it and paint kind of a half moon shape right next to it. I will leave a space between the two. Added a little bit more paint so maybe you can see. I want a definite white space between the two. And I did draw this out a little bit with a pencil, like I mentioned, which you wouldn't really want to do that. I don't want my pencil to show through. But as a demonstration, I don't have a lot of other choices unless I used a watercolored pencil. That might have helped, but for right now, I just used a number 2 pencil. And then I'm going to go ahead and put this third one over here, but I'm going to bump it up a little bit over here at the side and bring that down to the bottom, tapering that out at the bottom. I did pick up just a little bit of that paint. I want to make sure you can see that I bumped it up right here. And then I'm going to pick up a pretty loose water and paint mixture and just make a bump back here. Okay, that's it for right there. I'm going to pick up a little bit of that paint and just drop it down wet on wet along our edges and depositing a little bit more at the bottom down here. So I want to make sure I put more of that blue paint, the deep cobalt olive green mixture, and then just along the edges here, and let it do its thing. Let it just make its way out into that wash. If you feel like it's taken off on you a little bit too much, you can just smooth that down a little bit. Probably should have done this first one first, since it was also going to be the first one to dry. But I want to make sure that I add it to the bottom to kind of ground that bottom a little bit. Getting a little bit more water. Doing the same thing on this other side. You start at the top. A little bit rich on that. Have to make these little wedges pretty light so we have a good contrast between what we're dropping in. It's a lot like the wedges on an orange, if you can imagine that. Kind of just crescents. I went outside the lines down here a little bit, which not a big deal. I could just pick that up a little bit, I guess. I could also just dab it up with a bit of paper. Yeah, that worked best. Little paper towel. And then I'm going to start with bumping up here. Run it alongside. And it doesn't have to be exactly like the other side. You can even run it down like it's disappearing like this. There we go. And then now I'm going to pick up that more saturated color. Drop that in. You want to make sure that you mix a good amount before you start so that you're not remixing. If you have to remix, it's not going to be easy to match your color. So make sure that you make a little pile of it. Okay, and then remember, we want to make a little bump back here. I'm going to go ahead and hit this with a blow dryer so we can come up and put our stem in and we're not disrupting this. Okay, now everything is dry. It's not cool to the touch. And since we're artists, we know that we want to bring some of this color into other areas of our design. Also, I think it would be a huge distraction to put just this big dark stem into here. So I am going to bring in some of those cobalt colors and olives and build a stem out of that. We'll need a little bit of a dark color in there to bring a dark value, but it does not have to be something super dreary and heavy. I'm going to just kind of where these wedges come in, I'm going to lay in a little bit of this. Just like a real pumpkin. That's what we're going for, right? I'm going to pull this up. We'll add some other colors in here. Turn this around. And I'm going to just give it a little bit. I'm going to come up on the tip of my brush and make this thinner as I go, leaving some white space in there so that I can put some other colors in there. Rinsing out my brush, bring in a little bit of this olive. I don't want a real wet olive in here because I don't want it to make a bunch of cauliflowers, back runs. Okay, pretty happy with that. Leave a little bit of white spaces in there is perfectly wonderful. I'm also going to embellish this with a little bit of a violet color, just a little bit, laying some at the edge, letting it run in there, because I want to add violet in some of the flowers at the bottom. I'm just going to do some loose flowers. Leave the down below here for the center of my flower. Put a little bit loose, very loose. Anybody can do this. Just dab, 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 basically is all I'm doing. Picking up a little bit of water. Now I'm going to stick with kind of 5 petals, spacing them out. If I did 2 down here, I need to leave room for 3 more. So I'm going to go out the top and 1 out on each side. I chose this color because I knew that it would cover nicely down here and allow me to add a flower without worrying about coverage and whether or not it would cover up my little area here. So I'm going to let this dry and add a yellow center here in a little bit and work on another area. I'm going to add an oak leaf right over here, and I did put a couple little pencil lines, and I'm going to stick with our colors that we've got going on. So I'm going to use the olive green and then that violet color. Let me show you what I did here. I drew a line, and then I just drew a V and a V. All right. And I'm going to come to the front of it, the tip, and paint that olive. And then the top of it is going to stay olive. Brush is a little bit too wet. And then again, olive up here at the top. And I'm just rounding out that pencil line. And then I'm making a web in between like that. Tucking it right underneath my pumpkin. Same thing at the bottom. Kind of an olive at the tip. And then I'm going to just bring that olive to the center, putting a web across there. And then I'm going to clean my brush, pick up a little bit of that violet color. And I'm going to come around this pencil mark and join the two over here, letting that bleed up into that violet a little bit. The reason we're doing this is because we want our colors to repeat around our painting. So hopefully over time, you'll learn not only how to improve your watercolor skills, but also learn a little bit more about composition and ways to make your painting actually stand out. So everything's just not real flat and blah. Sometimes it's easy to look at other people's work and know, hey, that's better than what I can do, but I don't know why. So I'm going to take my pencil and put another oak leaf back here, and it's just going to come to the back, but I want it to be a little bit bigger. But since this is wet, I'm going to leave it alone and do an oak leaf down here, maybe out the side, just partial one, something like that. Olive green, making the edges of my pencil rounded to the middle and kind of put a web across the middle. Seems a little rich there. A little bit more water, kind of lightening it up, bringing it to the middle, bringing a web, and then we're just going to tuck that stem back there. Now, I'm going to lift a little bit of this, just one blot, boom, and then what am I going to do next? Any guesses? You know, I'm going to drop some violet in here. Here we go. And if you just break down shapes, over time, you're going to understand how best to lay that on the paper. Quit thinking leaf, 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 and just start thinking about rounded areas and how to connect things. Still gonna blot this up a little. There we go. Good. better. I mess around with things too much if you haven't noticed. I'm a fiddler. But I come by it honestly. Been years of fiddling. I'm going to drop in some of this cobalt violet. Oh golly, cobalt, deep cobalt. There we go. And I'll do the same thing over on this one over here. That way I'm picking up these colors from the various areas. There we go. And then just like we did over here, we're going to pick up a little of that. Okay, I'm going to add some little berries up here. And take my olive green and my fine tipped round. And then just kind of come off of the main stem. Just basically right, left, right, left. Nothing too complicated. I'm not going to go right here because that branch is really close. And then I'm going to show you a bit of a cheat. I went ahead and mixed a little bit of the violet up in this little palette, and I'm going to use the back end of my brush. Oh goodness, it's clanging. And dip it, and then just touch it to the paper and do a little circle. Now you can do it with the tip of your brush too, but honestly I always thought this was a little bit easier and a little bit more uniform if you can get the end of the brush dipped the same way. Once again, we're working with this limited palette because it makes your whole painting cohesive, and it also, I think, is a little bit of a deviation from the traditional fall colors and goes so nicely with this quote-unquote white pumpkin or light green pumpkin, which I think are definitely one of my favorites, but more difficult to paint. Okay, how do you like that? I like it just fine. It's not quite dry, but it's dry enough. I'm going to take some of this violet on my brush, put a little bit of leaf veining in, just to the tip of the leaf, and then out like that, and it'll blend in a little bit better too if it's not too dry. But I'm definitely staying up on the tip of my brush, and if you don't want to do this part, if you don't feel like your hand is steady enough, then don't do it. It's your painting, so you get to call the shots. There we go. Might as well put a little bit down here. There we go. You can add more up here. I definitely want to add just a little bit right here and bring it down. The reason I'm doing that is because I want that curl to look like it's in front. See how that just brought that forward? I'll put a little bit down here. The more I think about it, I'm going to do a little bit of yellow. I'm just going to dab this in. I don't want it to be... And come up on that violet a little bit. I'm going to pick up some of that orangey yellow, just for a little bit of a variation. There we go. That looks good. I like it. We need just a little bit of a bud or something. Go. I guess we got a lot of buds going on. And then I'm going to take some of that olive and drop it into the end there. That way it'll spread up in there. There we go. I'm happy with that. Why not, right? And then I'm going to take this violet and I'm going to just make some like loops with my fine brush out here. If you don't want to do that part, then you don't have to do that part. That's perfectly fine. I just thought it would kind of soften that up a little. I'm going to blow dry this and be right back. Alrighty, as we wrap this up, our pumpkin is floating just a little bit, so we want to make sure that we ground our pumpkin. So I'm going to take my wider brush again and just glaze just a little bit. I'm going to add a little bit of water to the bottom here and drop in just a little bit of that cobalt just to ground it a little bit. One last one. I'm just going to brush this up here just a little bit. Lay a little bit of this cobalt down in here. Just to kind of ground that down a little bit. There we go. Now, we need to put a little bit down at the very bottom. And I like to get it pretty wet, not getting into any of my other colors over here. I don't want anything to start running, especially if it's not 100% dry. And I am just going to put a little bit of a loose bit of olive green down here, just to give the illusion that we're not floating in air. It's okay if our other colors run just a little. You can dab a little bit. So it's not super even, but if it is up here over here, you really need to bring it up over here. There we go. So what do you think? I love how it turned out. I love how we put the violet in various places. I love that it's not a traditional fall orange pumpkin. I'm so glad that you came along with me today and painted with me. Please leave a comment and let me know what else you would like to paint so that I am sure to create videos that you're interested in. Thank you so much again for spending this time with me. Bye-bye until next time.